This is Truman the Grey Merchant. I'm currently working on a video where I look at every single Silverboard cards to see which ones work in Black Border. But while I'm working on that, I thought with all the talk of bottom-up and top-down planes and sets that's happening right now, it would be cool to make a compilation of all my videos on that subject, with some of the intros and outros removed. Time codes are in the description if you want to skip to a specific plane or faction. I hope this does a good job of demonstrating how indistinguishable top-down and bottom-up planes and sets can be sometimes.
Phyrexia. Religious influences. Phyrexia is strongly influenced by different perceptions of hell, down to its two hell-based alternate names. For those keeping track, that leaves us with 4 planes in Magic with a strong claim to being hell. I wonder if they all have a big rivalry with each other. The high school football games must be intense. Anyway, like the titular realm of Dante's Inferno, Phyrexia consists of 9 spheres layered within each other. The 7th sphere resembles hell the most, serving as a place of great punishment. The artifact used to defeat the Phyrexians' first incursion on Dominaria was the Golgothian Silex, which sounds very similar to Golgotha, site of the crucifixion. As Jesus is known as a great enemy of hell, a connection can be drawn here. Phyrexia's destruction of the angelic Sarah's realm could be seen as a representation of the war between heaven and hell. Phyrexia also had beings described as angelic. This could be inspired by the common belief that demons are fallen angels. Yawgmoth, the shaper of Phyrexia as we know it, is very comparable to Satan. Like Satan in Dante's Inferno, Yawgmoth resides in the very center of his realm. Yawgmoth also exhibits 2 of the traits that Satan is most known for: constant deception and offering dark deals. In retrospect, this was a bad time to talk about Satan so much. Interestingly, Yawgmoth's title of the Ineffable is a descriptor often applied to the Abrahamic God. Also interesting is that Phyrexia actually began as an Eden-esque paradise, complete with snakes hanging out in trees. Other religious influences exist as well. Phyrexia's fanatical knights are known as paladins. In real life, the paladins were legendary Christian warriors. The holy text of Phyrexia is known as the Scriptures, a word strongly connotated with Christianity. An official style guide states that their rites and rituals are church-like. Annoyingly, that source refers to a second page of the article that apparently no longer exists. Thanks, official Magic website. Claws of Gix describes a practice similar to relic keeping, which is common in many real-world religions. Name origins. Phyrexia's symbol and the plane's name come from the Greek letter phi. The rest of the name possibly comes from pyrexia, which means fever, and also has a Greek origin. This is fitting with Phyrexia's focus on disease. Much of Phyrexia was descended from Dominarians infected with a disease called phthisis. Phthisis was the Greco-Roman personification of rot, decay, and putrefaction, lending their name to a number of real diseases, including tuberculosis. Phyrexia's first city was called Gamalgoth. Gamal means beauty in Arabic, while the Goths were a Germanic people famous for their warriors. The more modern definition of Goth is pretty fitting for the Phyrexians too, to be honest. Yawgmoth probably loves the cure, Identity. The core identity of Phyrexia, known as Phyresis, is based on eugenics. This monstrous and ridiculous real-world ideology aims for perceived genetic perfection by attempting to control evolution. It is perhaps most famously associated with fascist Germany, but is also a shameful part of the histories of the UK, US, and beyond. For more information on this connection, and how Magic arguably poorly handles it, I recommend Spice 8 Rack's video on the topic, linked below. Relatedly, Phyrexia uses the term evolution to refer to an individual changing and improving. Scientifically speaking, evolution actually refers to gradual changes in an entire species over a great period of time. Phyrexia's complete lack of art, emotions, morals, personal thought, or freedom, and their drive for perfection through mechanization echo themes very common in science fiction. Examples of this include Doctor Who's Cybermen and Star Trek's Borg. Aesthetic. Phyrexia's aesthetic is heavily influenced by the artwork of H.R. Geiger. Geiger's work is described as cold, surreal, nightmarish depictions of biomechanical life. which fits Phyrexia very well. Characters like Gix and creatures like the Phyrexian Negator exhibit a strong resemblance to the xenomorphs of the Alien franchise, who were also designed by Geiger. The similarities are especially clear in the elongated head, bony protrusions, and mixture of exposed-looking and sleek flesh. Creatures. Gremlins originated in 1920s Royal Air Force culture and were blamed for mechanical problems in planes. Fittingly, Phyrexian gremlins mess with artifacts. Gargantua takes its name from one of the titular giants of the Life of Gargantua and of Pentagoul, a pentalogy of 16th century French novels. The two bear little similarity beyond their name and size though, with the novels mostly focusing on satirizing politics and religion of the time. If you think the academic landscape of the 1500s has had it too good for too long, this might be the series for you. Cackling Fiend shows a zombie, apparently, with their eyelids forced open, evoking the 1971 film A Clockwork Orange. Deshabo Tavak is likely inspired by modern versions of Arachne of Greek myth, both in her ambitious personality and her humanoid spider design. Various Phyrexian walkers and creatures draw influence from the Martian walkers of 1988's War of the Worlds. All of these vehicles were deadly war machines balanced on thin, spider-esque legs. Shredodon is just an AT-AT from Star Wars with tusks. Also, both AT-AT and AT-AT are perfectly acceptable ways to say it, so don't AT-AT me. Finally, my favorite element of Phyrexian lore is that their weakness to apes is apparently a recurring trend. This is a reference to how apes are awesome. Also, that savage gorilla is clearly an orangutan. I don't think anyone at Wizards knows anything about simians. Rath. Rath was an artificial plane created by the Phyrexians. However, it had its own cultures, giving it some unique influences. Stronghold and planar structure. Firstly, its name clearly comes from the English word wrath, meaning strong, vengeful anger, fitting for the staging ground of Yawgmoth's revenge against Dominaria. Wrath could be described as a pocket dimension, a common trope in science fiction. Relatedly, the flowstone that powers Wrath is essentially nanotechnology. The Stronghold was a military base housed inside a volcano, evoking the Spectre base in the 1967 Bond film You Only Live Twice. That's the one where James Bond does Yellowface. The Predator, a wrathy warship, bears resemblance to a Chinese junk ship, especially in its sails. Thumbscrews were a real torture device originating in early modern Europe. Volrath states that the torture will start small. As it was a slow process in real life, this is very accurate. On a similar note, Volrath's dungeon showcases an Iron Maiden-esque device. These torture devices are mostly associated with medieval Europe, but didn't actually appear until the early 19th century. The Evenkar was the title of the leader of the plane. It comes from Evincere, which means to conquer in Latin. One Evenkar was the shapeshifter Volrath, who had some visual similarity to the Twilight species of Star Wars. Why he, as a shapeshifter, chose to look like this 24/7 is beyond me. Contemplation shows Volrath magically viewing his progress through an orb. This imagery is common in fantasy, such as Saruman's Palantiri in The Lord of the Rings. Lobotomy's name comes from a discredited surgery method developed by Antonio Egas Moniz in the 20th century. This continues Phyrexia's theme of taking inspirations from real, flawed, and dark science. Civilizations. The Vek and the Dal were human civilizations with a strong Middle Eastern influence. This link is perhaps most obvious in their dress. They also had a naming convention where last names consisted of a short descriptor followed by a hyphen and then a clan name. This is common in many Arabic cultures. Some of the Vek and Dal were nomadic, as are some Middle Eastern peoples. The Vek also had oracles, which are most associated with classical Greece. Finally, the bola is an indigenous South American weapon. And if you look up what that name means in Spanish, you'll see why Nicobolas always has his full name when appearing on a card in that language. The Thalicos lack a consistent aesthetic, but their name is very Greek-sounding to me. The Sky Shroud Elves are pretty generic Tolkienian forest elves. They also apparently have the European fairy tale of the Three Little Pigs. Maybe they were actually stolen from Eldraine. Palisades were common across many historical cultures, with the name being of Latin origin. Their occasional blue face paint probably comes from the film Braveheart. Creatures. The Furnace of Wrath was said to be populated by giant salamanders. Salamanders have been associated with forges as far back as ancient Rome, and were frequently portrayed as monstrous in medieval folklore. Rabid rats showcases a common trope of rats carrying rabies. In actuality, according to the CDC, rats are almost never found to be infected with rabies, and are not known to transmit rabies to humans. I mostly brought it up to show that magic is too harsh on rats. Look at their little noses. Apes of Wrath's controversial pun name comes from the 1939 novel The Grapes of Wrath. The Mog likely take inspiration from the Orcai of the Lord of the Rings, being hulking, brutish, goblin-esque creatures specifically bred by a dark master for warfare. Lowland Basilisk is a basilisk, a legendary reptilian creature popularized by Pliny the Elder. Traditionally, basilisks kill with a venomous gaze, but the flavor text of Lowland Basilisk specifies that those of Rath are unique. The Lycids are very reminiscent of the facehuggers from the previously mentioned Alien franchise, both in design and biology. Both are parasitic, multi-limbed creatures that latch onto the head for nefarious reasons. The Jackalope is a humorous creature from American folklore. The angel in Angelic Blessing has wings on her ankles, which probably comes from some depictions of the Greek god Hermes. Miscellaneous cards. When the name and flavor text of the card reap are combined, they strongly evoke the biblical parable of reaping what you sow. The card Overlaid Terrain also has an even more direct allusion to this line. The term scapegoat also originated in the Bible, though it was used very differently there than it is now. Equilibrium discusses the weighing of souls. This motif goes back all the way to the weighing of the heart from ancient Egyptian belief, but the equilibrium imagery likely takes its inspiration from Christian art. Anarchist shows that Rath apparently has the concept of anarchy, a term first used in 1539 and rising to prominence in the 19th century. Cursed Flesh's flavor text references the 1929 novel A Farewell to Arms. Time Warp, with its flavor text, is clearly a reference to the iconic song of the same name from Rocky Horror Picture Show. Please do not copyright strike this video. Rats of Wrath features a statue heavily based on the Moai of Easter Island. Finally, High Ground is a reference to Don't Try It. Fun fact, I own 18 copies of this card. That is not a joke. Overall, I would say that Rath lacks consistency in both aesthetic and tone. Compared to the other three planes that I've looked at in this series, it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what effect the creators were going for with Rath. It's very disparate in terms of the pre-existing cultures they pulled from, and the real and mythical creatures that they included, and not in a way that makes Rath seem realistically complex or fleshed out. It seems more like half the cards for the plane were created individually and then haphazardly added in. Rath shines through the most when it's depicted as a dark, hopeless hellworld. However, this goal is all too often undercut by bad jokes and distracting references in flavor texts or random cards that don't fit that tone at all. Mirrodin. The plane. Mirrodin was originally known as Argentum, which is Latin for silver, fitting for a shiny metal plane created by the Silver Golem. I would say that the cyberpunk genre leads a great influence to Mirrodin, visible in elements such as visors and cybernetic enhancement. Mirrodin is also composed of layered spheres. However, I don't think it's Dante's Hell that leads influence here, but the concept of a stellar engine. This hypothetical megastructure will be built around a star, which it collects energy from. Mirrodin could be considered a stellar engine, in that it's a mechanical construction built around a collection of powerful suns. The modern-day understanding of stellar engines is only a few years older than Mirrodin's first appearance, but the base idea goes back to science fiction from 1937. The Panopticon was the surveillance center of Mimnarch. Later on, Karn was held there under the control of the Phyrexians. These two plot points perfectly represent the main components behind the Panopticon thought experiment. The Panopticon, devised by 18th century philosopher Jeremy Bentham, is a hypothetical prison built in such a way that a single guard could look at any cell at any time. The prisoners never know when they're being surveilled, so they always act as if they are. The literal prison element of the Panopticon is represented by Karn's time as a prisoner there. The Panopticon, as a symbol of surveillance, is represented by it being the center of Mimnarch's monitoring of the plane. The Glimmer Void expanse consists of hexagonal plates. The hexagon has many properties that make it important to engineering and geometry. I don't understand any of them, but that's fitting for a mechanical world. Hexagons are also highly associated with bees, who also have a reputation for engineering. The Oxida chain likely gets its name from the process of oxidation, which leads to rust. Fittingly, the area is full of red, rusted metal. Peoples. The Veldican have a vaguely Roman feel to them. The Synod, a group of Veldican leaders, takes its name from a Christian assembly that in turn takes its name from Latin. The researcher Pontifex is named after the award for a priestly council member in ancient Rome. Another Veldican, Janus, was named after a Roman god. Finally, the two peoples both had centurions. The Moriok probably get their name from the Morlocks of the Time Machine. Both are generally unpleasant, aggressive, skulking types. The leader of the Leonin is known as the Ka. This likely comes from the term Khan, used across Asia. One of the Leonin was named Kimba, which sounds a lot like the animated lion Kimba. Blinding Beam depicts a concept similar to the mythical heat ray of Archimedes. Finally, the Leonin also have Bola, still of South American origin. Creatures. The blink moths, tiny flying light creatures, likely originate from the will-o'-the-wisp and similar spirits from across European folklore. The Mir are confirmed to take their name from Myrmiko, which is Greek for ant, because of their small bodies and worker mentality. Additionally, the Greek Myrmidons, inhabitants of Thessaly, are now defined as a subordinate who executes orders unquestioningly or unscrupulously. Very fitting for Mimnarch's mindless minions. The strange artifact creature depicted on Stalking Stones is clearly based on Stonehenge. I guess the pieces of Stonehenge just walking over from their point of origin is one solution to the mystery. Doxer Colossus takes its name from the Colossus of Rhodes, a massive statue from ancient Greece. Miscellaneous cards. Reap and Sow provides this video's third reference to that Bible verse for some reason. Fist of Suns is highly visually reminiscent of the Infinity Gauntlet from Marvel Comics. Its flavor text speaks of limitless power, which the Infinity Gauntlet also offers. It makes sense that we end with New Phyrexia, the civilization who believes itself to be the pinnacle of perfection and the endpoint of evolution. In general, I will be focused on the elements of New Phyrexia that separate it from its predecessor, in order to avoid repeating myself. New Phyrexia has a more Roman bent. Their leaders are the praetors, which is a term for a Roman magistrate. Gen Gitaxis is an augur, which is another Roman title. Carnifex meant executioner in ancient Rome. This Roman influence overlaps with a mostly Catholic Christian one. The Machine Orthodoxy title of apostle is most associated with the followers of Jesus in the Bible. Relatedly, their title of Cenobite is a real term for a member of a community-focused religious order. However, it is most associated with the Hellraiser franchise. The Cenobites of that series share certain similarities with the Phyrexians, such as intense self-modification. Their holy book is also quoted in a book-then-verse format like the Bible. The Progress Engine ranks include Pontiffs and Exarchs, both of which are used in Christianity. Finally, Christian connotated words, such as Orthodox, Cathedral, Scripture, and Hymn appear too. The Geiger/Xenomorph inspiration is also back in full force. Head writer Doug Bayer specifically compared the Phyrexian influence over Karn to the machinations of the character Wormtongue in The Lord of the Rings. Factions. The White faction is aesthetically based on porcelain due to its cold, polished bone smoothness and creepy doll associations, combined with how it looks when cracked and rusted. In Norse mythology, the Norns were female beings of great power. For blue, chrome was chosen due to its medical connotations. Their spire monitor is very reminiscent of the Fell Beast design used in Lord of the Rings films. Black is inspired by a mechanic's garage full of grime and oil. Their title of Thane comes from English history. The Thanes of both cultures operate in a complex feudal system. The fact that there are 7 of them could also be inspired by the Princes of Hell, of which there are traditionally also 7. Sheoldred perhaps takes her name from Sheol, the Hebrew underworld. Red has an industrial feel to it. I would argue that the green faction is the least clearly evocative of a concept, just generally being gross animals. Vornklex's ability to absorb flesh from Kaldheim might be inspired by the Thing from The Thing. And I apologize in advance for the names that I'm definitely going to mispronounce in the next 15 or so minutes. This video will include Indigenous Central American, Spanish, and scientific terminology, respectively. And even though I actually have Central American heritage, I can't even pronounce a lot of English words correctly, so please bear with me. To begin, a brief overview of the plane of Ixalan. The plane is divided into 2 continents. The eastern continent of Torazone is named after its dominant nation, and represents the so-called Old World, especially Europe. The western continent of Ixalan is named after the plane, or vice versa, or neither. It's very unclear. It represents the so-called New World, especially Latin America. Ixalan block is set during the early days of these 2 continents' interactions, takes inspiration from the real-world Age of Exploration, the period of global history from the 15th to 17th centuries during which various European powers navigated, invaded, and colonized the Americas. In fact, the Age of Exploration world served as a nickname for the plane before they decided on Ixalan. The concept of exploration is portrayed mechanically through both the Explorer mechanic and the double-faced cards themed around discovering a location. Coincidentally, Ixalan, which takes place primarily in the analog for the Americas, was developed at the same time as Conspiracy II, which takes place on a plane inspired by European society in roughly the same time period. 2 sets even competed on who would get to use the Monarch mechanic. With all that out of the way, let's start examining where the elements of the plane's 4 major factions come from. The Legion of Dusk. In the words of Ixalan storyline writer Alison Lurs, the vampiric Legion of Dusk, hailing from the country of Torazone, are a delightfully thin metaphor. They serve as stand-ins for European colonizers, especially, but not exclusively, the Spanish and Portuguese conquistadors of the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. As the Ixalan D&D tie-in says, the Legion feel that they have a right to claim new lands despite the presence of people already inhabiting those lands. The Iberian influence is clear, from their armor and fashion, naming conventions, and religious and political systems. The Legion are equally devoted to crown and church. Said church is a very thinly veiled allegory for Catholicism, dominant religion of the Spanish and Portuguese empires. The Church of Dusk's borrowing of Christian or Catholic imagery includes the usage of terms such as saint, bishop, martyr, apostle, and paladin. It also extends to rituals such as the veneration of saints and their relics, sacraments, practicing prayer by going down on bended knee and clasping the hands together, and burning incense in a censer. While in smoke form, the vampires are described as smelling like myrrh, which could be a reference to the substance's inclusion in the biblical New Testament and contemporary usage by some Christians. They worship in cathedrals, and their ships are also stated by Lurs to intentionally resemble them in their design. Finally, like Christianity, the Church of Dusk's central beliefs are of sacrifice and redemption, with blood serving a sacred purpose. The figure they worship, Saint Elinda, is portrayed by the narrative as a good and moral teacher, whose lessons are twisted and ignored by a subset of those who claim to follow her. She is perhaps intended to serve as a metaphor for Jesus Christ, as the real and fictional respective conquistadors committed atrocities in the name of their deities that the two deities clearly wouldn't condone. Additionally, like many of the European aristocrats of the past, religion is more of a political tool and a guiding belief system for certain members of the Legion. With a D&D tie-in stating, many are politically ambitious, invoking Torzone's hierarchy when it serves their interests, but ignoring all the rules of church, state, and morality when those rules become a burden. The Church of Dusk also has a tendency to excommunicate people and regions for wholly political reasons. The rank of Viceroy was used by both the Spanish and Portuguese empires as well. Torzone's Queen Mirada is likely inspired by Queen Isabella I of Spain. Many of the Legion's cards showcase the real-world brutality of the conquistadors, but Vona stands in for specific prominent European colonizers such as Cortez. Her title of Butcher of Magan calls back to a very long list of historical and recent figures who have been referred to as the Butcher of X. Encampment Keeper shows that the Legion uses Mastiffs, a dog breed with a long history in Europe, and several varieties that originated in Spain or Portugal. Relatedly, the Legion is shown introducing both cattle and horses to Ixalan, just as the Europeans did to the Americas. In the Unbowed trilogy of short stories, we see the Lunau region of Torzone. Torzone is a continent-spanning empire with various unique regions under its control. Lunau in particular is gratuitously French, with a lot of stereotypical French phrases utilized by its people. The fact that its local menagerie has lemurs could be a reference to Madagascar's status as a French colony from 1897 to 1958. The region also bears more general European elements. Lunau's upper class is described as sporting a variety of 18th century fashion trends such as bodices and bone-white wigs and makeup. A Latin influence exists as well, with a gladiatorial arena and the use of the term proletariat. Finally, the situation that Vivian sets up very much resembles a description of the Pamplona running of the bulls of Spain. A few other sources lead inspiration to various Legion elements and cards as well. Deathless Ancient shows a vampire being transported across the ocean while slumbering in a coffin, as Dracula was in his eponymous 1897 novel. Said novel also popularized the idea of vampires transforming into or manipulating fog. The Legion's rank of Hierophant comes from an ancient Greek cult and also appears in some tarot card decks. Sword point diplomacy may be a play on the phrase gunboat diplomacy, which originated in the 19th century. Next up, we have the Pirates of the Brazen Coalition, who take inspiration from a wide variety of historical and fictional tales and tropes. They are by far the most diverse faction in the block, both in terms of species and human ethnicities. This reflects how in our history, pirates existed all over the world, and racially diverse crews were not uncommon. They also have gender parity, and their most prominent leader, Admiral Beckett Brass, is a woman. This calls back to well-known historical female pirates, such as Anne Bonny and Mary Read. Coalition's members operate under the Pirate Code. Historically, pirate crews were known to have these agreements of conduct. Similarly, the concept of a pirate parlay, featured prominently in the Pirates of the Caribbean films, is mentioned.
She's invoked the right of parlay with Captain Barbossa.
Parody phrases like skullduggery, swashbuckle, and buccaneer are thrown around too. Fanatical Firebrand features a pirate with burning gunpowder in his beard. The infamous Blackbeard was said to do the same thing with fuses in order to frighten his enemies. Angrath introduces himself as a dread pirate, referencing the 1973 novel The Princess Bride. Walk the Plank references the famous trope of, well, making someone walk the plank. This method of execution was rarely documented in historical accounts, but is beloved by fictional ones. I have no idea why this guy is so red. Bad sunburn, maybe? Raider's Wake's flavor text is a play on the old pirate phrase, dead men tell no tales. Pitiless Plunderer shows a pirate biting down on a gold coin to check its authenticity, an old Hollywood cliche. Pro tip, if you ever get the chance, don't do this. It's not actually useful in determining authenticity, and you could devalue the artifact. Also, you shouldn't be putting strange coins in your mouth in the best of times, but you certainly shouldn't do it right now. Spectral Sailor, March of the Drowned, and Crumbling Necropolis reference the long history of pirate ghosts and skeletons in pop culture. Silent Gravestone and Grim Captain's Call allude to a Davy Jones-esque supernatural figure. Curious Obsession and Treasure Map show stereotypical X marks the spot pirate maps. The fact that the pirates' canon experts are monkey-like goblins is a play on the term powder monkey. Young men and boys chosen for their small size who are responsible for ferrying gunpowder to artillery during the Age of Sail. The related card, Makeshift Munitions, utilizes the abnormal ammo trope, also prominently used in Pirates of the Caribbean. Vraska's device, the Thaumatic Compass, may be inspired by Captain Jack's compass, being a compass of vague, mystical powers capable of tracking down magical MacGuffins. Thaumaturgy is the ability to work miracles. Captain's Hook is inspired by the character of Captain Hook, who originated in the 1904 play Peter Pan. Its card text references how Hook lost his hand to a crocodile, who then devoted itself to finishing him off. A few non-pirate sources are used as well. Sirens originate in Greek mythology. Like the sirens of old, those of Ixalan have entrancing voices and a tendency to mess with sailors. Ixalan sirens are unique in that multiple males of the species are shown. Ogres, European mythological creatures, are also mentioned as belonging to the Coalition. Orcs, as we know them, originated in the Lord of the Rings. The term Reaver comes from the Border Reavers, who raided along the Anglo-Scottish border from the 13th to 17th centuries. Vault of Catlacan references a trope made popular by Disney's Scrooge McDuck. Charging Monstrosaur depicts Arnold from the Magic School Bus. That's canon, you cannot prove otherwise. Hornswoggle may sound piratey, but the phrase was not used until well after the Golden Age of piracy. Similarly, Unfriendly Fire references a term first recorded in 1918. The pirate goblins of Ixalan are inspired by the capuchin monkey, found across Central and South America, and famed for their appearances in film and TV, including Pirates of the Caribbean. Mass Mutiny's flavor text references Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. The flavor text of Sailor of Means references a phrase that originated as the slogan of the New England Regional Chamber of Commerce. Exciting stuff, I know. Revel in Riches references how, before this gets deleted by Reddit. Next, the merfolk of the River Heralds. They are primarily inspired by the Maya civilization of what is now southern Mexico and Central America. The similarities are clear in the fashion of the River Heralds. In particular, their head frills resemble traditional Mayan headdresses, and like the Maya, the Heralds utilize body modification. The Mayan civilization was divided into small kingdoms, or polities. Somewhat similarly, the Heralds live in groups called bands. The two peoples also share a love for jade, utilizing it in jewelry, weaponry, and figures. River Herald's boon showcases a tree frog of a species found across former Mayan territory. Some of the Herald merfolk also resemble axolotl, amphibious creatures found very close to said territory. The Maya and the River Heralds did have some significant differences. War was not uncommon to the Maya, while the Heralds were more defensive and reactive in nature. Additionally, the Maya generally did not wear full heavy armor, unlike the Heralds, who often dressed like full-on Mandalorians. Finally, the Herald bands were small nomadic groups of up to 12, while Mayan polities were more comparable to a city-state. Jace's Sentinel features a more European-style jade helmet. The Great River, from which the River Heralds take their name, is likely inspired by the Amazon River of South America, being a massive river with many tributaries and a great cultural significance to various indigenous peoples. Tishana's Wayfinder isn't based on anything, but the art really amuses me, so I want to talk about it. Look ahead! The Sun Empire faction is often referred to as the Dinosaur faction. However, there are also various dinosaurs in Ixalan block with no connection to the Sun Empire. Since the line is blurry, I'm going to mostly talk about the human elements of the Sun Empire and save the Dino discussion for the next section. According to Wizards, the Sun Empire is mostly inspired by the Aztecs, with some elements from the Inca as well. Once again, this influence is seen in their naming conventions, armor and dress, weapons, and architecture. The two civilizations also share similar political structures, with both being empires devised of various allied city-states, with the alliance's level of unity being varied, determined by numerous factors, such as the central leader's strength. Additionally, both cultures held poetry in very high regard. Tamales have been consumed across Mesoamerica for many thousands of years, including the Aztec Empire. The Sun Emperor is described as drinking exocatl, a drink that was very important among Aztec nobility. Ashes of the Abhorrent depicts cremation, which the Aztecs were known to partake in. Gilded Centennial, Fire Shrine Keeper, and Pillar of Origins resemble Aztec artwork in their designs. The Inca laid inspiration to the Sun Empire's religious beliefs. Both peoples primarily worshipped a sun god who had 3 aspects and served as a patron of the civilization. Additionally, it's mentioned that a high priest of the Sun Empire once tried to replace the emperor. While no such struggle happened in real life, high priests were more powerful in the Incan hierarchy than the Aztec. The respective empires do have some major differences though. For example, the Sun Empire only recognizes 2 gods, and have an almost monotheistic view of their primary god, the threefold sun. In contrast, the Aztecs and the Inca both had large pantheons. The Sun Empire's evil bat god, Alcazatz, is clearly inspired by the Mayan bat god of the underworld, Camazotz. But unlike Alcazatz, Camazotz was not the primary evil being in a good-evil cosmic binary. Humans having been formed from clay is a staple in many belief systems from around the world, though the Aztec and Incan religions are not included. Other sources of inspiration exist as well. Oaxaca is clearly a representation of El Dorado, the mythical lost golden city of the Muisca people. The Sun Empire also took on some traits of modern-day Latin America, as a creative team worked with Wizards' Latin American offices to ensure accurate representation. An example of this is how Watley is very close to her large extended family. Her metallic fans come from Asia. Path of Metal depicts a booby-trapped hallway, calling back to media such as Indiana Jones. Fountain of Ichor plays with the common misconception that oil is formed from the remains of dinosaurs. gold-forged garrison is maybe a nod to Hellboy 2 The Golden Army's titular automatons. Lastly, the official Planeshrift tie-in states that Alkazatz's temple is obviously inspired by a classic D&D adventure, The Hidden Shrine of Tamawachan. As promised, I want to talk about the wildlife of Ixalan, starting with the dinosaurs. And yes, I know that pterosaurs and plesiosaurs and the like weren't dinosaurs, but they are in Magic, so I'm going to call them that for simplicity's sake. Ixalan's dinosaurs take inspiration from, oh boy, wish me luck, Velociraptor, Oviraptor, Microraptor, Spinosaurus, Ceratopsidae, such as Triceratops, Ankylosaurus, Sauropods, such as Brontodon, Tyrannosaurus rex, Pterosaur, Dilophosaurus, Parasaurolophus, Pelagosaurus, Pachycephalosaurus, Stegosaurus, Dimetrodon, Plesiosaur, Allosaurus, and Hadrosaurus, respectively. That took 47 takes. All of Ixalan's dinosaurs are feathered, representing the most up-to-date view on dinosaur appearances. Carnage Tyrant, Trapjaw Tyrant, and the Regosaurs evoke the meaning behind Tyrannosaurus rex's name. Crazy Whiptail depicts a sauropod using their tail as a whip, which the real-life creatures may have been able to do. Star of Extinction takes inspiration from the KT event, in which a massive comet or asteroid likely killed off the dinosaurs. However, it should be noted that Star of Extinction depicts a comparatively minor event from Ixalan's past. Ripjaw Raptor, referring to raptors as clever, may be a nod to Jurassic Park.
Clever girl.
Cards like Strider Harness and Imperial Ceratops have a Dino Riders vibe to them, but it could be unintentional. New Horizons evokes movies such as The Land Before Time and Dinosaur, which end in dinosaurs finding a new paradise to live in. Spoiler alert for those children's movies that came out 20 and 32 years ago, respectively. The creative team also took some liberties in their depiction of dinosaurs. Fro Deathspitter references Jurassic Park's fictitious depiction of the Dilophosaurus. Tusks appear exclusively on mammalian species. Tezamok is by far the most out there of the Ixalan dinosaurs, and is maybe based on a horned lizard. Finally, despite what pious interdiction shows, attempting to convert a dinosaur to your religion is actually very difficult. Ixalan has a variety of other interesting creatures too. A fish that Jace eats sounds like it's from the now extinct Plactodermy class of fish. Or maybe he's just looking at a picture of you. A molefolk references a dolphin in their metaphor, like inspired by the river dolphins of South America. I'll be honest, these things scare me more than any dinosaur ever could. Yee. At one point, the Sun Emperor uses a local variant on the When Pigs Fly idiom, stating that Huatli would sooner find a flying panther in the lost city of Orizaka. Interestingly enough, Ixalan has griffins, which are pretty much flying panthers. Huatli did end up finding the lost city, so I guess the simile still works. Ixalan's griffins take visual cues from the macaws found across the Americas. Krakens are also mentioned as appearing on Ixalan. The Kraken originated in Scandinavian culture, but went on to become an important part of global sailor lore. Dryads originate in Greek mythology, but the concept of nature entities is pretty universal, including in the Americas. Ixalan's versions take inspiration from tropical birds in their visual design. Despite what Canal Monitor may suggest, monitor lizards are not native to the Americas. Both phoenixes and harpies hail from Greek mythology, and are represented on Ixalan as owls, which are found across the Americas. Scooter and Heartstopper depicts a giant ancient millipede, such as the Arthropleuria, though Arthropleuria was not known to be venomous. Shorekeeper is a trilobite, and its flavor text refers to it as a filter feeder, which some real trilobites were. Fleet Swallower resembles the stylized depiction of giant fish often seen on old maps, or alternatively, the biblical fish that ate Jonah. Feathered serpents are mythical creatures found across Mesoamerican cultures. The Chupacabra is a cryptid that was first reported in Puerto Rico in 1995, meaning that Magic the Gathering is actually more historic than this famous monster. Also, given that the Chupacabra is known to drain victims of blood, and its name literally translates to goat sucker, I argue that should be a vampire beast in its creature type. That's besides the point. To finish off, some miscellaneous cards and elements. Azure isn't from Ixalan, but from Vraska's conversation with him, we see that he exists as a metaphor for interventionism and imperialism, such as European colonization. Jace's initial situation resembles various tales of castaways, most notably Robinson Crusoe. Rousing Dagger references a form of divination that likely originated in Germany. Vraska's Scorn is a play on the original myth of Medusa, where a mirrored object had to be used to safely view her. Baffling End is spontaneous human combustion? That name is accurate because I have absolutely no idea what's going on here. I just don't get it. Is the victim a vampire who burned in the sunlight? Because Ixalan's vampires aren't weak to sunlight, and also, I think the silhouette suggests a human pirate. But why did the clothes burn away, but not the fabric on the sword? And why does the sword have a burn outline when it's still there? Did the dinosaur cause the situation? Or did the situation just get the dinosaur's attention? What are those two big indents? Where's the silhouette's other arm? Why you answer my calls, Mark Rosewater? What are you hiding? How deep does this go? I will come to Austria, Matthias Karros. I will find the truth.
don't think I won't. Hi everyone, after recording this, I received a very kindly worded and reasonable letter from the artist of this piece explaining what's happening in it, so I retract my earlier yells, unless Carlos is just covering for the dinosaur. I don't care how deep this goes, I will find the truth. The Abzan Houses. The Abzan were primarily inspired by the Ottoman Empire. Growing from a coalition of Turkish tribes, the Ottoman Kingdom would, at its height, control territory across Africa, Europe, and Asia. It lasted from the end of the 13th century until the early 20th. Much like the Abzan Houses, the Ottoman Empire is made up of united, semi-autonomous tribes and clans. The Ottoman Empire's dramatic expansion was due to raids conducted against neighboring areas. The Abzan mirror this, with most of their creatures being of the warrior or soldier classes, and many of their cards discussing an apparently endless state of war. The Ottomans were particularly famous for their skilled archers, which is reflected in the cards Longshot Squad and Archer's Parapet. The Khan of the Abzan, Anna Finza the Foremost, is described as leading her people into battle in person. Similarly, the Ottoman leaders often accompanied their armies into war. The armies of the Ottoman Empire were originally nomadic. Emulating this, the Abzan take their homes with them wherever they go. One of the reasons the Ottomans were able to achieve such great success was through the practice of div-sirmi. Through this policy, the children of conquered areas were taken, converted, and drafted. These individuals sometimes achieved great political power and reputation. The Abzan utilized a variant of div-sirmi. The orphan children of their enemies, known as Krumar, were adopted by the Abzan and raised as their own, being considered full members of their respective houses and fighting for them. The Ottomans and Abzan also shared strong religious beliefs. Ottoman leader Bayezid, in particular, was a devout follower of mysticism. Similarly, the practice of ancestor worship was very important to the Abzan. Abzan architecture also takes great inspiration from that of the Ottomans. For example, compare the Ottoman room-like fortress to the art of various Abzan cards. Note how they share similar coloring and design. The armor and fashion of the Abzan is also rooted in Ottoman influence. Notice the similarities in headwear and flowing robes especially. Two civilizations also shared a fondness for curved swords or scimitars.
Your curves are kicking!
The Abzan's use of African animals such as ibexes, rhinos, and elephants reflects how the Ottoman Empire extended into northern Africa. Similarly, the Aven that partially make up the Abzan resemble African vultures. Finally, the Abzan's greatest value is that of endurance. The nobles of the Ottoman Empire were highly committed to preserving the traditional Ottoman way of life. Ultimately, their civilization endured for over 600 years, outlasting many of its surrounding kingdoms. However, despite the Abzan taking major inspiration from the Ottomans, they differed in a couple of major ways. Firstly, the Ottoman Empire was often aggressively militaristic, constantly seeking to expand its borders. The Abzan, on the other hand, were more defensive, seeking mostly to protect their territory and trade routes. Additionally, the Ottomans lacked effective siege weapons for much of their history. In contrast, the Abzan had enough siege beasts to destroy any standard enemy force in their path. While the Abzan primarily referenced the Ottoman Empire, a few other sources were used as well. The massive war elephants with towering saddles that the Abzan used take clear inspiration from the Mumakils or Oliphants of Lord of the Rings. Much like the Abzan, the Mumakil's riders, the Haradrim, were an alliance of tribes that lived in a great desert. Additionally, the mask depicted in the card Honor's Reward does not resemble that of any Ottoman armor. It perhaps takes inspiration from ancient Greek death masks, or the fictional armor of the Persian immortals of 300. Finally, the Mastodon, the real-life pachyderm that the Abzan weaponized, lived exclusively in the Americas, at least 6 miles away from any Ottoman territories.
Get out the way! Get out the way!
The Jeskai Way. The Jeskai draw inspiration from the Shaolin Monastery of Henan Province, China, built over 1500 years ago. The monastery sits atop one of the peaks of Mount Song. Similarly, the strongholds, temples, and academies of the Jeskai are dotted across the Tarkir's mountaintops and cliffsides. The Shaolin Monastery is Buddhist. Buddhism teaches that there are 4 noble truths that lead the path to freedom from suffering. Similarly, Jeskai believe in 6 fires that light the way to enlightenment. This reflects the Buddhist concept of Buddhahood, in which one is awakened or enlightened. Additionally, both Buddhism and the Jeskai Way value the sacred lotus and what it represents. In addition to religious dedication, the monks of the Ixalan Monastery were and continue to be famed for their martial arts and physical prowess. The Jeskai share this affinity. Shaolin Kung Fu is divided into many different styles, as are the martial arts of the Jeskai. The Jeskai's propensity for flowing orange or yellow robes and shaving their heads also comes from the dress of the Shaolin monks. Some of the Jeskai architecture also takes inspiration from the monastery, particularly from its curved roof and strong red coloring. However, the Jeskai went up to the Shaolin by adding a skate ramp to their temple. Finally, the designs of the animals and animal people of the Jeskai are influenced by the animals that inhabit China, the location of the Shaolin Monastery, specifically the harrier hawk and the praying mantis. The Jeskai and the Shaolin do differ in some ways though. While there are many Buddhist temples across Asia, they are not unified to the degree that the Jeskai strongholds are. Additionally, the Ixalan Monastery has generally been under Chinese rule. Jeskai were their own civilization under their own authority. While the martial arts of the Jeskai have a strong Shaolin influence, the more mystical depictions take inspiration from wuxia, Chinese martial arts fiction. In this genre, mastery of the martial arts leads to an array of fantastical skills, clearly reflected on certain Jeskai cards. Disabling an opponent by striking specific pressure points is a particularly common trope in wuxia. A Grand Master is the head of a fraternal order, such as the Freemasons. Additionally, the Ifrit and Djinn, who partially make up the Jeskai, come not from Chinese, but from Arabian tradition. The design of Tarkir's Ifrits also take inspiration from the Applejack Cinnamon Stick Man and that one Travis Scott meme. The Mardu Horde. The Mardu Horde primarily draw inspiration from one of the most bloodthirsty and ruthless groups in human history, middle school students. Sorry, they actually reference a much less brutal and dangerous civilization, the Mongol Empire. The Mongol Empire began in 1206 and lasted 162 years. At its height, it was the largest continuous land empire in human history. Much like the Mardu, the Mongols were nomadic raiders. The Mardu most valued the trait of swiftness. The Mongol Empire achieved its success partly due to the efficiency and speed of its intercontinental messenger system. Additionally, the Mardu and the Mongols have a near-identical battle strategy. Both begin their attacks with mounted archers and lightning wielders in the Mardu's case, before fighting hand-to-hand with their now disoriented enemies. The two hordes also share similar armor, in particular their helmets and armored skirts. Lastly, the Mardu use a style of bow also utilized by Mongol archers, and the horses that the Mardu ride resemble those of Mongolia. The major difference between the two civilizations is that unlike the Mardu, the Mongols were conquerors. While they would occasionally completely obliterate territories after defeating them, they would generally take them over and incorporate them and their people. In contrast, the Mardu raid their enemies but don't do much in the way of full invasions. It is also important to note that while Genghis Khan is the most well-known non-fictional Khan in the West, he is not the origin of the term. He was born Temujin and will not take the pre-existing title Khan until later in his life. Like the Abzan before them, the Mardu also take inspiration from the Lord of the Rings. Their orcs being ravenous barbarians harkens back to Tolkien's genre-setting depiction of them. The influence is especially clear from their warg-esque monsters that they ride, and the cannibalistic urge of the crave that the clan undergoes while under Khologan also resembles the cannibalistic properties of the orcs of the Lord of the Rings.
Looks like meat back on the menu, boys!
The rock comes from Middle Eastern mythology. Lastly, some of the Mardu members wear armor resembling that of Japanese samurai. Brood. The Sultai Brood. The Sultai Brood take primary inspiration from the Khmer, or Angkor, state that originated in 13th century Cambodia. However, the Sultai reference a greater variety of sources than the other clans we have spoken about so far. The primary trait shared by the two kingdoms is intrigue. The Khmer court was plagued by coups, usurpers, and political rivalry. At one point in the state's history, a new monarch arose an average of once every 10 years. Similarly, the Sultai court is a den of backstabbing and infighting between various would-be rulers. The Khmer also struggled against the forces of physical and environmental decay. The Sultai flipped the switch by weaponizing their decay and using it to their own ends. Khmer architecture, the temple complex of Angkor Wat especially, serves as an obvious influence on the Sultai center of Karoo. In fact, the Angkor Wat was a massive royal tomb, in turn influenced the Akkad necropolis of the Sultai. The Sultai also take inspiration from Khmer boat design. The fashion of Sultai's members highly resembles that of Khmer people as well. Many of the animals of the Sultai reflect those of Southeast Asia, such as crocodiles, cobras, and vultures. Southeast Asia is also one of the first regions to cultivate bananas, which is why Mark Rosewater has declared war on the region numerous times. Similarly, the Sultai vampire variant resembles the regional mythological creature of the Leia, also known as the Pinagalan or Managao. Rare Sultai demons also resemble this. The vampire's penchant for face stealing likewise resembles a variety of Asian spirits. The Naga and Rakshasa also originate from the Hindu and Buddhist beliefs that Khmer followed, but as I'll discuss later on, other sources factored into their respective portrayals. As previously mentioned, the Sultai take inspiration from a disproportionately large number of sources compared to the other clans. Aruspics come from ancient Rome, not Asia. Mandrills are found exclusively in Africa. Also, mandrills are monkeys, not apes, and are no longer considered to be baboons. Plus, they very rarely return from the dead as giant zombies. While the Naga do come from Southeast Asia, Tarkir takes some liberties with its depiction of them. Rather than being cunning, dangerous mortals, the original Naga were semi-divine and frequently beneficial to humans. Similarly, the Rakshasa of Hindu belief were not inherently evil. Additionally, they could take on many forms. Tarkir's depiction of them as exclusively tigerish seems to be borrowed from Dungeons & Dragons. Lastly, they were not known for being devilish dealmakers. That is more of a trope of Western demons. The Temur Frontier. The Temur are based on the shamanistic peoples of Siberia. Like the early Siberians, the Temur family groups are nomadic hunter-gatherers living in a near inhospitable frozen mountain range. The two peoples share strong spiritual practices and beliefs. Both hold shamans and the spirits of nature in high regard. Speaking of those spirits of nature, the designs of Temur's ravens, elk, grizzly bears, cave bears, and woolly mammoths come from Siberia as well. In Shamanic Revelation, we see cave paintings similar to those that have been found in Siberia. Finally, the clothing of the two groups also match up, especially their headgear and fur coverings. The Temur also take elements from cultures and areas outside of Siberia. The state of being described in Awaken the Bear resembles the berserker fury of Norse culture. The phoenix originates in Greek mythology and the somewhat similar Feng Huang from China. Likewise, the Yeti hails from the Himalayas. The goblins and some of the ogres of the Temur resemble the Yeti as well. The elemental Scion of Glaciers resembles Cernunnos, a god from Celtic tradition. Additionally, neither mastodons nor saber-toothed cats lived in Siberia. I'm just a tie-dye dragon. Dragons. The dragons of Tarkir are divided into 5 broods, each with their own unique designs. Jamuraa and her brood resemble the dinosaur Ankylosaurus, with their down-to-the-ground physique, tough, sharp scales, and thick limbs. Jeskai and his brood's designs are similar to that of the Huang Huang, a bird of Chinese myth. Tarkir and her brood's chimera-esque design harkens back to the Quilin, a creature of Asian myth that makes dragon and mammalian features, including prominent antlers. Salamgar and his brood use snakes or eels as the basis of their design. The Dragon Lord's love for treasure utilizes the trope of Western dragons hoarding wealth. Kalahan and her brood also have a bird-esque design. Their 4 wings may be inspired by the 4-winged cherubs of Abrahamic religion. To finish up this video, I'll discuss the inspiration behind the aspects of Tarkir unaffiliated with a clan or dragon. The Salt Road references the Silk Road, being a massive trade route through many lands and nations. Kirin are supernatural creatures from various Asian cultures, comprised of different animal parts. Their arrival is said to foretell a powerful leader's rise, a concept that we see in Tarkir's versions of the creatures as well. This creature type also calls back to Kamigawa block. The Lamasu, in turn, is a protective spirit from ancient Sumeria. Tarkir's depiction of them as foretellers of great change differs from the myths, which characterize them as protective guardians. The Sambar is a variant of deer found across Asia. Peak the Horizon resembles the real-world phenomenon of Aurora Borealis, or Northern Lights. The Sagu Mauler appears to be a particularly upset yak, the creature found across Northern Asia. Collateral damage and pyrotechnics depict a gunpowder weapon similar to those from Chinese history. Hued stone retainers and Keeper of the Lens appear to be based on the Terracotta Army of China. Ancient carp references how carp, an Asian group of fish, grow in their environment and have been reported to live for over 200 years in some instances. Dance of the Skywise mentions a religious belief similar to the cycle of reincarnation found in Hinduism and Buddhism. Impact Tremors references the trope of Native Americans putting their ears to the ground as a tracking technique. Relatedly, Kindred Fairy references the idea that Native Americans of the plains used every part of the buffalo. Roast takes inspiration from that time you misspelled something in your group chat. Dragonloft Idol harkens back to Kashisha or Kamaniu, statues of lion-like mythological creatures from China and Japan respectively. Finally, Scarelord Reckoner's flavor text quotes the Code of Hammurabi from Babylonian history. Thank you so much for watching this video. To be real for a moment, in these trying times, working on this video has been good for me. I worked on it in 2 countries, 2 states, and 4 cities, so I am so excited to finally get it out. If you'd like to see me mess up more names, both real and fictional, please be sure to like and subscribe. Also, please leave a comment if you have any questions, suggestions for future videos, or things that I missed. Thank you. Meandering Tower Shell takes its physical design from the giant tortoises of Aldabra and the Galapagos. The idea of a turtle with mountains on its back resembles the war turtle of Hinduism and Chinese mythology. Dominaria. It's big. It's bigger than Earth. It's bigger than the DC Earth, which is also bigger than Earth. Through years of sets located there, Dominaria has become the most complex setting in Magic. And since 2022 is the year of double Dominaria, it's only going to get more complicated, so I might as well get this out of the way now. From time to time, I like to take a look at the inspirations behind bottom-up planes. Bottom-up planes are primarily designed with mechanics in mind, but still pull from a wealth of traditions. Dominaria is no different, except for the fact that it takes concepts from a greater range of sources than any other plane in Magic. So many, in fact, this video won't be quite the same as the previous installments. Since there are literally more than 10 times as many cards on Dominaria as some of the other planes I've looked at, I'm not going to go quite as card by card as I have in the past. I choose not to subject myself or you all to that. Instead, I'll be concentrating on the broader cultures and locations of the plane instead. For the Rath and Phyrexian aspects of Dominaria, see my Phyrexian Inspirations video. For more information on the science fiction elements of Dominaria, see my video on the history of science fiction and magic. As always, I do my best when it comes to pronouncing things. I've consulted people when able, and the internet when necessary, although I feel the internet is often inaccurate when it comes to that, so apologies if I mess up. Please do correct me if I get a pronunciation or anything else wrong. So without further ado, the history, mythology, pop culture, and more that inspired Dominaria. Part 1. As always, likes are greatly appreciated. The Outer Dragon War was a mythologized conflict between godlike beings for control of the world in Dominaria's earliest days. It is comparable to stories from many cultures, such as the Greek Titanomachy, Norse Aesir-Vanir War, and Hindu battle between Devas and Asaras. The winners were eventually overthrown themselves, another common religious theme. Terisiare is a now decimated landmass, also known as the Lost Continent, taking inspiration from Atlantis. Atlantis likely originated in the works of ancient Greek philosopher Plato, but the myth has been added to greatly over the generations. Some of these later interpretations recontextualize Atlantis as a utopia with incredible technology, greater than even what we have today. In the past, Terisiare was ruled over by the Thrawn Empire, who took inspiration from that interpretation, being a powerful and technologically advanced nation ultimately undone by hubris. Thrawn's cities also have mostly Greek-sounding names, including its capital, which literally means an idyllic time in the past. Other Greek elements include city-states, a democratic structure, and their art. Their Thrawn metal is similar to adamant, an ultra-strong metal from the writings of several areas, including Greece. Like the Greeks, the Thrawn had an extensive constellation system. One was named after Elysium, an afterlife location in Greek mythology. The Weatherlight is probably inspired by the Argo of Greek mythology, a magical ship full of questing heroes. Fittingly, it is related to the Greek-inspired Thrawn, according to the Art of Magic the Gathering. That book also says that it is inspired by Jules Verne. Thrawn also has a minor Hebrew influence, featuring golems and a handful of Hebrew words. Rebek's name is similar to the biblical Rebecca. Ner'sil, a figure from this region, devised a ring used by various characters, most notably Lemdul. This ring is very comparable to Tolkien's One Ring, being magical and very powerful, but also corrupting. Lemdul incubated his zombie army in the Frost Marsh, also known as the Lake of the Dead, which reminds me of the Dead Marshes from the Two Towers. Man, Tolkien comes up a lot in these videos. I should start a bingo list for these things. Latnam also likely takes inspiration from Atlantis, being a once great civilization of magic and knowledge that has since fallen into the ocean. Also, there's a card literally called Lord of Atlantis, who hangs out in Latnam, but it would later be retconned as an in-universe translation error. Its wizarding college, the School of the Unseen, may be inspired by the idea of invisible colleges, small communities of interacting scholars, or Discworld's Unseen University. Terisiare was also the region most affected by the Ice Age. I have an entire video about that block, if you're interested. What we think of as the Ice Age, what the block was most inspired by, is the Pleistocene. Much of the block's wildlife comes from this era, but in the grand pop culture tradition, dinosaurs were also added. Current-day animals from the Arctic region are also included. References to other cold regions, such as the Himalayas and Scandinavia, are also present. There's also a not insignificant ancient Egyptian influence, for some reason. The interdimensional entity, Merit Lage, who has frozen in a glacier in this region, is a clear Lovecraft homage. Finally, I'd like to take a moment to ponder the ramifications of Urza owning traditional Christian headwear. Because he's a chess master? Let's go with that. Terisiare was also the location of Urza's big war crime fun time, which triggered Dominaria's Dark Age. This era was similar to mostly inaccurate perceptions of Earth's so-called Dark Ages, such as corruption and increased church political power. Said church, the Church of Tal, is a very thinly veiled version of Christianity, with their creed almost being a Bible verse. Unambiguous Christian crosses are also pretty common in early Dominaria sets. I've seen it speculated that Lord Ith may be inspired by Dumas' manning the Iron Mask, as he survives a long imprisonment and his release foils the villain's plan. Marsil is inspired by the biblical parable of the rich man and Lazarus. The Falahi Empire were desert nomads, likely inspired by various nomadic peoples of the Middle East. Their leader was referred to as Qadir, a word of Arabic origin which means capable, powerful, or mighty. The empire also had domed palaces, similar to some of the real-life architecture of the region. Middle Eastern mythological creatures such as rocks inhabit the area. Their custom of using knotted cords to keep records comes from the Inca of South America. Yodia, an enemy of the Flahi, also had Arabic influences. For example, the use of the patronymic Ben, though with a city name instead of a parent. One of its natives, Bolivar, dressed like a 19th century European officer. Almaz also had Middle Eastern influences, as it is ruled by a pasha, which is a Turkish term. One of its regions, Barca, takes its name from an ancient Libyan city. The Carpathian Mountains perhaps take their names from the Carpathian Mountains of Europe, as the two mountains have similar terrain. The dwarves who lived in the region, when it was known as the Sardian Mountains, are pretty traditional Torquenian dwarves. They live in a mountain and do a lot of mining, and like the dwarves of Moria and the Lonely Mountain, they get wiped out. The city of Dorgard sounds Norse. Similarly, the kobolds of Kurkeep are very close to the goblins of the Misty Mountains in The Hobbit, down to both having a large, grotesque leader. Likewise, the Argoth/Fiendhorn elves take after that book's Mirkwood elves. They live in a giant mystical forest and have Torquenian names like Elisindral Ladamdrith. The forest also has giant bugs, though Magic's elves ride them rather than fight them. The nature goddess Gaia is worshipped across Dominaria, but perhaps most here. She comes directly from Greek mythology. There is also a Scandinavian influence in the names. Those elves would later migrate to Yavimaya, a living, interconnected forest that has hostile outsiders. This is similar to Tolkien's Old Forest. It is also inhabited by sentient apes, similar to those seen in pulp fiction such as Conan the Barbarian and Tarzan. Pitdown was the location of the Fountain of Youth, a mythical spring spoken of since ancient Greece and strongly associated with the conquistador Ponce de Leon. The three-way Battle of Pitdown had some similarities to the Hobbit's Battle of the Five Armies, with both involving a goblin invasion. Argive is similar to Renaissance-era Europe. You can see in some of the fashion, as well as the fact that it is ruled by an elaborate system of nobles and has a fascination with an earlier civilization. Its capital of Penregan may come from King Arthur's sometimes last name, Pendragon. Much of Keldor's imagery comes from Germany and Scandinavia, like everyone on Dominaria, apparently, specifically in regards to their armor and also names. Fittingly, the Norse-inspired Jotun giants ally with them. The Keldoran city of Sordab was taken over by its robotic underclass, a theme very common in fiction, such as 1921's RUR. Bardovia, traditional rivals of Keldor, have similar origins. Their name is similar to the German state of Bavaria. They have fictional Viking armor, their art is very Norse-esque, and German names are common. There's also a clear Celtic influence. The nation of Umak may be inspired by the Yupik peoples of Alaska in the Russian Far East, based on their naming conventions and shamanistic religious traditions. The mostly uninhabited Boreal takes its name from the Greek and Latin word for far northern. Every place I've discussed so far comes from the same continent. A disproportionate number of sets took place there, though, so they shouldn't all take this long. Legends had legendary creatures from all across Dominaria and from a number of eras. They are united by mostly being based off of pre-existing D&D OCs, and that is abundantly clear if you read the bios of any of them. Almost all of them are described as really cool, really powerful guys with one noble mission. The continent of Aerona's mythical origin is a goddess sacrificed her body to become the landscape. This is reminiscent of stories from many belief systems, such as the Chinese Pangu, Mesoamerican Claudoctli, and Norse Ymir. The sea strait known as the Rip is referred to as such because of its riptides. It's not one of the most creatively named parts of Dominaria. The Keldans are confusingly similar to the Keldorans, both in name and in their Norse inspirations. Maybe I should have been pronouncing that J earlier. Keld is specifically inspired by the more negative Viking perceptions of the region, with a cold environment, raiding, slavery, long ships, horned helmets, and a desire to die in combat. They also have sword and sorcery / Conan vibes. Their warlords are known as Witch Kings, a term originated by Tolkien. Their mythological ship, the Golden Argosy, probably takes its name from the previously mentioned Greek Argo. Other areas of Aerona, likely to be Scandinavian-inspired, are Hammerheim and Gardurns. The Whispering Woods were home to the famous magic character and Green Goblin cosplayer Greensleeves, who shares her name with a traditional English folk song. Other than that, the connection seems minimal, based on what that song is apparently about. The Herloon Minotaurs may be inspired by Native Americans, based on their naming conventions. Some Native American peoples, such as the Nanticoke Lenni Lenape, Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota, have naming ceremonies where individuals are given a new name later in life, often based on an element specific to that person.
The inhabitants of Herlun have similarly devised nicknames. Their carvings and tattoos also have similarities with American petroglyphs, found in places such as the Santa Clara River Reserve. Benalia is based on medieval Europe, with knights, castles, and stained glass. The various clans reflect different European nations. The Capuchin clan got their name from Shakespeare's Italian Capulet family. The Avenant have a French linguistic influence, with their leader being the suzerain. The Jurev are similarly Eastern European-esque. The Tarmila might be Spanish. Circe is near the Mesa Pegasi, who are inspired by the unicorns of European legend, specifically the common idea that they were only comfortable around maidens. And yes, the fact that only the women have to prove their purity before marriage has a lot of baggage. The Benalia page also has this incredibly gross tidbit. I can't say I'm shocked that the author who thought of that went on to collaborate with Newt Gingrich. Kush is just straight up a real place, an ancient Nubian kingdom, which is also mentioned throughout the Bible. Barbar is another real term, originating from the Berbers of North Africa. And yes, having apes in traditional African garb with a real-life, Europeanized African term applied to them makes me very uncomfortable. Verdura has Amazonian themes, being controlled by powerful warrior women, while the men are relegated to a remote village and are forbidden from venturing inland. The MTG wiki only describes the women as competent, which feels like a neg. It also shares a name with an Italian river, which is probably a coincidence. La is described as a legendary region, which could be taken from the mythical Tibetan city of Shangri-La. Onia had 7 cities of the sun, which are reminiscent of the 7 cities of gold that the Spaniards believed could be found in the New World. The elves of Llanowar also take inspiration from Tolkien's Wood Elves, specifically their xenophobia. I don't know why the Magic Wiki seems almost impressed by this fact. Again, if you're my viewer who gets upset when I accuse fictional characters of xenophobia, get over it. The 4 Saucerized Giant Spiders. The elves are divided into hames, which is a Scottish word for home. A general Celtic influence can be seen in some of their names. Many of the elves have red hair, which is often associated with Celtic heritage. Interestingly, the Mohawk-esque hairstyle, sported by many Llanowar elves, is not too dissimilar to that of a 2,000-year-old bog body found in Ireland in 2003. Man, there are a lot of Tolkien homages on Dominaria, and let me tell you, the pace is kept in Part 2. It's Tolkien all the way down. This is Grey Merchant of Magic, back for Part 2 of the history, mythology, and pop culture that inspired Dominaria. Likes are much appreciated. Jamuraa is mostly inspired by various African cultures. Karoo are South African plateaus. Askari is an East African term for soldier. Most of the content's language is reminiscent of Swahili. In fact, quite a few unmodified Swahili words are used. Ikondu means red, Chaza means clam, Naomba means home, and Jabari is a name which means brave. A wide range of traditional African clothing is shown in Jamuran art, such as the Zulu Ishikolo and Southern Indibele Zila. The name of the Horn of Plenty region is reminiscent of the Horn of Africa, also known as the Somali Peninsula. Real African animals are common, though there are also many non-African animals and monsters, such as the Maori Tanifa. The Great Desert is likely based on the Sahara. Sirocco is a real weather phenomenon that originates in that region. An Arabian influence is also seen in many of the supernatural creatures, as well as some of the names and architecture. One of the nations of Jamuraa, Sukuata, comes from the Arabic word for market. It was founded by people from both the similarly Arabic-inspired plain of Wildfire and Arabia, which is a straight portrayal of the world of 1001 Nights. Its ranks include the Turkish Pasha and Arabic Vizier. Its naming convention uses the Arabic patronymic Ibn. The nation had secret assassins guilds, similar to the Persian Order of Assassins. Middle Eastern fashion, such as the Turkish Chechek, is common. Jamuraa is also home to a forest named Arborea, a place with a bunch of trees named Arborea. Incredible stuff. Presumably it borders the Hydro Ocean on the coastal coast. Jamuraa also has the Great Wall, which shares a name with the Great Wall. The hostile desert of Sukurvia is reminiscent of the planet Arrakis from Dune. It is inhabited by sandworms and has underwater oceans like Arrakis used to. I can only assume that the name Craggy Coast was taken from a location in Fortnite. Caracas is a Sanskrit word for significator, which has astrological meaning.
Vintara and its war elephants may be inspired by India. Madara is based on Japan. Like Japan, it is an archipelago. Also like Japan, it is the relative size of Japan. It is home to the Umezawa clan, who were exiled from Kamigawa, as well as other Japanese-coded individuals. The Japanese language is used throughout the empire. Bogarden might be inspired by Hawaii. It has a volcano landscape, volcanic gods, and possibly a linguistic influence. I don't have much to say about Steel Island, except I better not catch you confusing it with Metal Island. Don't you dare. The card Orborg quotes Edgar Allan Poe's The City in the Sea, a poem about a city ruled by death, hinting at its inspiration. On to Otaria. Otaria is pretty visually varied, in part because the continent is home to refugees from all over Dominaria, and in part because the artistic vision was contentious. Aerona is similar to the Greek Hecate, a goddess composed of 3 different women. Morality Shift depicts some Franciscan monks. The clothing of the Daru Plains is all over the place. Some wear armor made of grass, similar to the rattan armor historically used in parts of Asia. Most of the order wear vaguely Middle Eastern attire. Even Brigadier dresses like an 18th century European military officer. Tireless Tribe looks like they're about to kick a messenger into a pit. And there's whatever this is. They also have Central Asian yurts. Temingazin is inhabited by prodigal sorcerers who allude to the biblical parable of the prodigal son. I can't explain exactly how, but of all the places we've looked at so far, Temingazin feels the most like a D&D setting. The Cabal maintains power over its members through true name magic, a concept found in religions and traditions from across the world. Their pit fights resemble Roman gladiatorial combat, taking place in a coliseum, involving slaves, captured prisoners, voluntary fighters, and animals. Their leader is referred to as Pater, a Latin word for father, as well as a Roman god. And of course, I can't not mention the Mur Empire is another entry in the long pop culture history of underwater civilizations, which probably evolved from the Atlantis myth mentioned in Part 1. It is inhabited in part by the octopus humanoid cephalids who resemble ithalids of D&D. Both are power-hungry, cruel, and highly hierarchical. They also have some similarities with Cthulhu. The Riptide Project was a collection of researchers whose experiments got out of hand and caused ruin, which is reminiscent of every story ever made. Their Primarch creations resemble the winged monkeys of The Wizard of Oz. Pardia has mountains full of dwarves and goblins. Yes, it's like Tolkien. Yes, it's like all the other dwarves and goblins on this plane that are like Tolkien. The similarly named continent of Sarpadia, famous for its fallen empires, shares its name with a Hindustani melody. Before the fallen empires, there was the Tachakta Empire, which fell. Wait a minute. It appears to be Mesoamerican based, and is unfortunately pretty racist in how it is portrayed. Ikatia reminds me of Kingdoms of Men of Middle-earth. Besieged empires, beset by orc/goblin invasion, and forced into ever-shrinking strongholds. And unsurprisingly, these orcs and goblins are again very Tolkienian. There could also be a Greek influence, with the name resembling Ithaca, and they use the Greek phalanx system. Their quest for the Rainbow Veil is reminiscent of the Arthurian search for the Holy Grail. Their people and places also have very British names like Henry, Margaret, and Montford. The Order of the Ebon Hand created slaves with magic and was inevitably overtaken by them, just like every other time someone tried that in Dominarian history. Some of them dressed like Romans. Mercenary Ivra Yursdottir has a Scandinavian surname. The Vadalian Empire takes its name from the word for water in various Slavic languages. Their military has a division called the Akula Current, which is Russian for shark. In general, their language appears to be Slavic-inspired. Their leader, Galina, also has a Slavic name. The previously mentioned Atlantis/Atlantis is also a colony of the Empire. Their foes, the Homerids, lobster/crabmen, are pretty original, predating Zoidberg by a number of years, for example. I looked up Crabman on Wikipedia to try and find something older, but I think I was misunderstood. The Crimson Peaks dwarves mine, live in a mountain, and are being overtaken by goblins and orcs. It's Tolkien again. As are the forest elves of Havenwood. Their ranks include Theolon and Lauren, who have very Tolkien names. I can't believe Dominaria is a more accurate Tolkien adaptation than the Amazon series. Teleria is reminiscent of the archetypal tropical desert island full of castaways. It was originally considered a sailor superstition, calling back to various mythical islands of marine lore. It is home to a tabernacle, a term of Hebrew origin, though it looks more like a Christian church. Kalaman has forest elves and invasive goblins. Take a guess what they're based on. Come on, take a guess. It is also home to the Alaborn, who are weird because they mostly dress like medieval Europeans, except they also have 17th to 19th century guns. Condor is another Dominaria location that I would refer to as generic Western fantasy. Castles, evil wizards, etc. Garthanor sounds straight out of Middle-earth. Telemar almost shares a name with a nation from Narnia. And you better believe the Carrion elves are as Tolkienian as they come. They also have Exarchs, which is a Catholic and Byzantine term. Nyx is named after the Greek goddess of the night. No, the other Nyx, the one that hasn't been relevant since an unpublished mid-90s comic series. The Planeswalker War that occurred there follows the classic comic trope of a villain manipulating heroes into fighting each other. The sharp, dangerous Shiv probably gets its name from slang for an improvised blade. It sits in an oceanic ring of fire, a term taken from a collection of volcanoes in the Pacific. The landscape is constantly reformed by volcanic activity, similar to places like Hawaii. Its people believe that Shiv hatched from an egg, a motif found all over the earth. There is a high concentration of dinosaurs here, taking inspiration from Lost World fiction. Finally, the island is home to the Shivan Gorge, who is not to be confused with Shivan George, who wants higher bills than $1. The Gitu wear headdress similar to the Arabic kafia. They're also nomadic, like some Arabic groups. Sur is a desert nation with pyramids, making the Egyptian inspiration clear. Dominaria's one natural moon, the Misc moon, has an orbital period of 28 days, which is about the same as our own moons. Juno, a planet in Dominaria's solar system, is referred to as the Evening Star, a title most frequently given to Venus. Finally, was in servitude for 7 years and 7 days. 7 is a number with significance in practically every belief system. 7-year or 7-day periods show up in places like the Bible and British folktales. So, Dominaria. I like Dominaria. I like its sense of age and evolution, and how all of its many peoples interact with each other. I'm not one of those people who wishes Magic never left it, or wishes that every plane was as complex as it though. I just don't think that's feasible. My favorite planes are usually the ones with multiple civilizations, such as Tarkir and Ixalan, but I do have a limit. I'm glad Dominaria exists, but since they decided not to make it 30 times the size of the Earth, you can't just keep adding new, previously unmentioned continents forever, and you also can't devote decades of attention to every plane. Dominaria is an impressive and valiant effort to piece together lore that was very often quite disconnected. From miscellaneous flavor texts, books that have very little to do with magic, board games, abandoned video games, unreleased RPGs, council encyclopedias, and more. And it's neat that they did that. It doesn't always make sense, but they've done the best they can with what they've been given. My point is I don't think Dominaria was initially crafted with the level of foresight that some people seem to think it was. It's very much a post-facto creation. Artist and continuity manager Peter Venters has noted that the chaos of Dominaria's early days is not necessarily the same thing as depth. I also wouldn't mind if they had broken the mold a little more often. For one, several regions have very similar names, like Pardia and Sarpadia, or Keldor and Keldun. Meanwhile, goblins, elves, and dwarves each have 5 or 10 largely indistinguishable societies that for the most part just aren't as memorable as many of the more distinct versions of those species from other planes. I like the Lord of the Rings, but representing each Tolkienian race once would probably have been enough. Again, I'm a little tired of the Tolkien homages. Finally, another script done. Ugh. Ah. Ooh. Yeah. Ah. Wait, it's all Middle-earth?
Always has been.
Thank you for watching, and thank you to all my patrons. I'll be back with a real video soon. Bye.